Good morning. Welcome to Ahmed Shakil 5858. I am Ahmed Budnam. I am thankful to all international news sources and my team. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, Asian, African, Australian channels and AP, AFP and Reuters news agencies. Now, the headlines. A largest business swap has taken place between America and Russia after Cold War. A feat in diplomacy. American athletes are making records in Paris Olympic. Some other nations are also doing the same. Trump doubles down on attacks on Kamala Harris regarding her racial identity. How Hamas leader killing took place in Tehran. 170 million Americans are still under heat alert. Political turmoil continues in Venezuela. Differences between South American nations. World is waiting for Iranian response. On Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrial, S&P 500 and Nasdaq all went down. Now the headlines. Rather watch the channels.
Tonight, breaking news on a historic day. 3 American prisoners, including Paul Whelan and Evan Gershkovich, soon to be reunited with their families. Part of a multi-country swap with Russia involving 24 prisoners, the biggest deal of its kind since the Cold War. Whelan and Gershkovich and another American journalist detained by Russia taking off from Turkey, heading to the United States, involving 24 prisoners, the biggest deal of its kind since the Cold War. Whelan and Gershkovich and another American journalist detained by Russia taking off from Turkey, heading to the United States. Smiles all around on the plane. Their families speaking to them from the Oval Office with President Biden. The president calling it a feat of diplomacy and thanking America's allies who helped make it all possible. Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter, detained for nearly a year and a half, recently convicted of spying in what the U.S. called a sham trial. Jubilation in his newsroom today. Whelan, the retired Marine, held for nearly 6 years, repeatedly left out of earlier prisoner swaps. Mary Bruce from the White House, how it all came together, and what Paul Whelan's brother told me in our exclusive television interview. The gold rush at the Summer Games and the history made. Simone Biles proving why she's called the greatest of all time. Katie Ledecky breaks another all-time record in the pool. Maggie Rowley with late details from Paris. The race for the White House. Donald Trump doubles down on his attacks on Vice President Harris, questioning her racial identity. Rachel Scott reporting. The stunning new details about the assassination of a top Hamas leader while he was visiting Iran, as Tehran weighs its response. And the extreme heat grips most of the country. 170 million Americans under heat alerts.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Thanks.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Thanks for joining us on this Thursday night. I'm Whit Johnson in for David, and we begin tonight with that historic prisoner exchange. At this hour, several Americans are on their way home after a landmark multinational deal involving the U.S., Russia, and other American allies. President Biden celebrating what he described as a feat of diplomacy. 24 prisoners changing hands, the White House calling it the most complicated swap in history. 3 Americans and a U.S. green card holder set to reunite with their families, including former Marine Paul Whelan and Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. The exchange months in the making. The prisoners flown from Russia to Turkey, then handed off to U.S. officials. Vladimir Putin turning over 16 prisoners, getting 8 back in return, including a Russian hitman convicted of killing a Chechen rebel in Berlin. At the White House, President Biden with families in the Oval Office, speaking with their loved ones for the first time since their release. And the staff at the Wall Street Journal applauding in the newsroom today, the Journal calling it a joyous day. Right now, the former prisoners are on the move, scheduled to arrive at Joint Base Andrews later tonight. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris will be there to greet them. ABC's chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce leading us off tonight.
After years of agony and painstaking negotiations behind the scenes, tonight these are the first images of the American prisoners leaving Russia, their first tastes of freedom. Seen on a bus to the airfield, then being led across the tarmac by soldiers and onto a waiting plane. Among them, Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, appearing to crack a smile in his seat. It is the largest, most complicated prisoner swap since the Cold War, playing out this afternoon in tense moments on an airfield in Ankara, Turkey. It's a sweeping deal involving 24 prisoners in at least 6 different countries. 4 prisoners released to the United States. American citizens Gershkovich, former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan, Russian-American journalist Alsu Kurmasheva, and U.S. green card holder Vladimir Kara-Murza, a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and a critic of the Kremlin. Back at the White House, the president gathering their families in the Oval Office. The moment the swap was complete, the president telling them the good news. Then getting on the phone, the families speaking for the first time with their loved ones, knowing they are finally on their way home. On the other end of the line, the Americans, all smiles, posing for pictures with the American flag, and then boarding the plane to finally make their way to the U.S. Shortly after the president, the families by his side announcing it to the world.
Their brutal ordeal is over, and they're free.
The president noting Kurmasheva's daughter, Miriam, will now be able to celebrate her 13th birthday tomorrow with her mother by her side.
Now she gets to celebrate with her mom. That's what this is all about. Families able to be together again, like they should have been all along.
Biden heralding the deal as a sign of the power of diplomacy.
The deal that made this possible was a feat of diplomacy and friendship. Friendship. Multiple countries helped get this done. They joined the difficult, complex negotiations at my request, and I personally thank them all again.
The president directly involved in the negotiations. Even the hour before Biden announced he would not seek re-election, the president working the phones, trying to get this deal across the finish line. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan also deeply involved, today overcome by the emotion of the moment and relief.
I spent a lot of time with the families of Evan and Paul and Alsu, and most of the time, as you can imagine, those are tough conversations. But not today. Today was a very good day.
Tonight, we are told initially talks also included the possible release of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, but he died in February behind bars. An administration official saying it felt like the wind had been taken out of our sails, but they still saw a path forward, just a more rocky one. The linchpin to negotiations, Russia's insistence that it include the release of convicted murderer, Russian hitman Vadim Krasikov, but he was being held in Germany. President Biden then reaching out directly to the German chancellor.
This deal would not have been made possible without our allies. Germany, Poland, Slovenia, Norway, and Turkey, they all stepped up. And they stood with us. They stood with us. And they made bold and brave decisions. Released prisoners being held in their countries who are justifiably being held. And provided logistical support to get the Americans home. No question. Whether allies matter. They do. They matter.
Vice President Kamala Harris also appealing to allies face-to-face at a global security summit in February. Today, she too is celebrating.
We never stopped fighting for their release. And today, in spite of all of their suffering, it gives me great comfort to know that their horrible ordeal is finally over.
Gershkovich's release comes just 13 days after he was sentenced to 16 years in a Russian penal colony in a secret trial with no public evidence presented, convicted for what the U.S. government called fabricated charges of espionage. The 32-year-old was the first American journalist arrested for spying in Russia since the Cold War, detained in March 2023 while on assignment, accused of passing information to the CIA. Tonight, the Wall Street Journal's newsroom erupting in cheers at the news of his release. His family saying in a statement, "We have waited 491 days for Evan's release, and it's hard to describe what today feels like. We can't wait to give him the biggest hug and see his sweet and brave smile up close." Paul Whelan had been behind bars for nearly 6 years, serving a 16-year sentence for similar sham espionage charges. The 54-year-old security consultant was visiting Russia for a friend's wedding when he was arrested, slapped with charges that he, his family, and the U.S. fiercely denied. In all, 16 individuals held in Russia, now free, including some Russian political prisoners. In exchange, allies releasing 8 Russian prisoners, tonight welcomed home by President Putin.
Truly a remarkable day. Mary Bruce joining us now from the White House. So, Mary, walk us through the next steps here for those freed Americans and when they're expected back on U.S. soil.
Well, the 3 Americans are expected to touch down finally back home late tonight, just before midnight, at Joint Base Andrews. There to greet them will be their families, the president, and the vice president. And tonight we are hearing from one of the few people who may truly be able to understand what they're going through. Brittany Griner, who was released back in 2022, saying tonight that she is head over heels happy for their families, saying any day Americans come home is a win. With
joy and relief for those loved ones. Mary, thank you. And for Whelan has done everything possible to keep his name in the making sure he got. Or I spoke to brother David about how this all the family's reaction and what happens next. David, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure it's been an extraordinary day for you and your entire family. If you could first just describe that moment when you learned the exchange was successful, Paul was free, and would soon be coming home.
It was relatively late this morning. I was being very cautious until I saw an announcement from the White House that Paul was free and that he was on his way back. We had been through 2 prisoner releases before where he had not come home. So despite the growing media announcements, come home. So despite the growing media announcements and speculation overnight and then even into this morning that an exchange was happening and that Paul was going to be a part of it, I didn't really allow myself to believe that it was going to happen until I saw that announcement by the White House. And of course, we're overjoyed and hope to actually see him soon.
You noted in your statement today that Paul had been detained for more than 2,000 days. Describe this emotional roller coaster, the ups and downs, as other prisoners were released from custody, but Paul remained in Russia.
I think it's difficult. You want to be generous. You are happy to see other people freed. But you do start to wonder, and I think we were concerned that as time went on, Paul was going to become one of those insolvable cases. I think additionally, with Russia, there were so few concessions that the U.S. government could make that the Russian government seemed to want, that I think we didn't have very high hopes that this was ever going to happen.
How difficult has it been for you and your family to keep that hope alive for all these years?
I think you do your best for your family member. If you have a sibling or a parent, you want to support them as much as you can, and if they're in a dire circumstance, whether it's something like what Paul experienced or even just like a difficult illness, you want to do what you can and keep hope alive so that they have the best life or the best outcome possible. And I think the difficulty in these sorts of situations is that the family has so little control over what's happening. Paul was a pawn of the Russian government and became part of a geopolitical fight that really has nothing to do with Paul or our family or anything that he did. So I think we just, do our best to keep our hope up.
Now, we know there is a process here, but when do you hope the family will get to see him again? That's
really up to Paul. I think we have been very determined, as of today even, not to get Paul away. He has been held up, been told what the Russian government first. Time for him to have the agency. We are hoping that he will spend time in the post-isolation unit down, I think it's in Texas, as much as he needs in order to maybe to have our parents come down and see him, or at least be able to meet up with our parents soon.
And David, we know that you and the rest of your family will be there with him through every step of the way. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and hopefully you get that family reunion very soon.
Thanks very much for having me.
Live coverage of the former prisoner's historic return later tonight, right here on ABC. We do move on now to our other top headlines and a record day at the Paris Olympics for 2 of America's biggest stars. Gymnast Simone Biles further cementing her incredible comeback, and swimmer Katie Ledecky again making history in the pool. ABC's Maggie Rulli from Paris tonight.
Tonight, 2 American women making Olympic history. Golden Girl Simone Biles, the first American gymnast to win the all-round, and swimming great Katie Ledecky becoming the most decorated American female athlete ever. Simone Biles calling these games her redemption tour after withdrawing from the same event in Tokyo to focus on her mental health. Today on the vault, executing the Yurchenko double pike, now renamed the Biles 2. Biles soaring, then closing out the all-around with her floor exercise. Biles going head-to-head with teammate Suni Lee, who took bronze, and fierce competitor Rebecca Andrade from Brazil, who won silver. The 3-time Olympian wearing her gold medal with a diamond goat necklace.
It is crazy that I am in the conversation of greatest of all athletes because I just still think I'm Simone Biles from Spring, Texas that loves to flip.
And just hours later, Katie Ledecky leading Team USA in the 4x200 meter relay, winning silver, her 13th medal overall. And we were there to see Simone cinch gold. As one fan told me, watching her make history gave him goosebumps. And I was right there with him. And get this, Simone isn't even done yet. She has a chance to win 3 more golds at these games.
Amazing. The rest of us cheering along with you. Maggie Rulli, thank you. Back here in the U.S. in the race for the White House, former President Donald Trump facing backlash for questioning the racial identity of Vice President Kamala Harris. Trump now doubling down on his attacks. ABC's Rachel Scott in Chicago.
Tonight, facing growing backlash, former President Donald Trump doubling down, challenging Vice President Kamala Harris's racial identity, sharing this photo of her and her family wearing traditional Indian clothing and writing, "Your warmth, friendship, and love of your Indian heritage are very much appreciated." Just 24 hours ago, I asked Trump about his supporters' attacks on Harris as a, quote, DEI hire. DEI being short for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman.
I respect
she went to a historically black college.
Harris is both the first black woman and the first Asian American to serve as vice president. She graduated from Howard University, and when she was elected senator, she joined the Congressional Black Caucus.
It was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better.
Tonight, Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, defending Trump's comments.
Kamala Harris is a chameleon. She goes to Georgia 2 days ago. She was raised in Canada. She puts on a fake Southern accent. She is everything to everybody, and she pretends to be somebody different depending on which audience she's in front of.
And as for Harris, Democrats began their official nominating process today. Harris could become the official Democratic nominee as early as Monday, and she is expected to announce her running mate by Tuesday.
Rachel Scott for us. Thank you. Overseas tonight, a major turn following the assassination of the political leader of Hamas in Tehran. Sources telling ABC News he was killed by a bomb smuggled into his guest house 2 months ago and detonated remotely. ABC's Matt Rivers in Tel Aviv.
Tonight, stunning new details in the assassination of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Haniyeh killed by an explosive device that had been smuggled into his room as part of an Israeli plot. 3 Middle Eastern sources confirmed to ABC News and first reported by the New York Times. One of those sources saying the bomb was stashed in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps guest house roughly 2 months ago and was detonated just after 2 a.m. local time Wednesday once it was confirmed Haniyeh was inside. Just hours before the Hamas leader seen at the inauguration of Iran's new president. A source saying the plan was in place for months, but Israel was reluctant to act while Haniyeh was in Qatar where he lived. The U.S. only briefed on assassination details after it happened.
And with just moments ago, President Biden speaking with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying once again that the United States will help defend Israel against any possible retaliation from Iran or Hezbollah. Those attacks could happen any time now.
All right, Matt Rivers reporting from Israel tonight. Thank you. Now to Wall Street. Investors taking a beating today. The Dow closing down nearly 500 points at 40,347. The drop fueled by worse than expected employment, manufacturing, and construction data. Investors looking ahead to tomorrow's monthly jobs numbers. When we come back here, dozens hurt in an ammonia leak in Virginia, what investigators say is to blame. And we're tracking severe storms in the heartland as dangerous heat grips much of the country. Next tonight, authorities outside Washington, D.C. say a failed valve is to blame for an ammonia leak that sent dozens of people to the hospital. First responders racing to the scene to treat workers at an industrial complex. It's home to a company that produces meal kits for major retailers and airlines. When we come back, severe storms and more record heat. We're tracking it all. To the index now, we're tracking dangerous weather in the nation's heartland. A severe thunderstorm watch across several states, damaging wind gusts, large hail, and tornadoes all possible. While oppressive heat grips most of the country, 170 million Americans on alert from California to Florida up to Maine. Still ahead, a final note on a golden day in Paris. Before we go tonight, a final note from the Olympics and the remarkable history made by two American women. Katie Ledecky now becoming the most decorated U.S. female athlete in Olympic history, 13 Olympic medals in all. One of her teammates in today's relay race, Erin Gemmel, incredibly, is the daughter of one of Ledecky's early coaches from more than a decade ago. There they are, congratulating each other. And Simone Biles, now the first American gymnast ever to win the all-around competition twice, taking home her 6th gold medal, saying tonight, quote, 3 years ago, I never thought I'd step foot on a gymnastics floor again, revealing she worked hard both physically and mentally and was determined to not give up. And both women have more competitions and more chances for gold in the coming days. Thanks so much for watching tonight. I'm Whit Johnson in New York. For David and...
For 9 days and nights, the media gave Kamala wings and turned her into the pantsuit messiah. The Harris sugar high was the media's excuse to bury the biggest story of the election, Trump dodging an assassin's bullet. But yesterday, everything changed. The talk of the town again was Donald Trump, who knows better than anybody that if you want to change a narrative, you create a little controversy. 45 RSVP'd to the Black Journalist Convention and played the race card.
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that
I think somebody should look into that too when you continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some Republicans
I really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be.
Last night, we said we had no idea how this was going to play. But the dust is starting to settle, and we're picking up a few clues. The media barely covered Trump's comments today. If these comments were supposed to be devastating to the Trump campaign, the media would be playing it every hour. If this was so explosive, why didn't Kamala capitalize on it? She put out a bland paper statement last night, but never brought it up again. They haven't cut an ad. Her surrogates aren't going wall to wall. A Democrat doesn't want to talk about race and play the victim and call Trump racist? That's strange. I wonder why Kamala is avoiding this. Does it have something to do with white dudes for Harris? And why isn't Kamala talking about this egregious attack on DEI? Maybe the black community sees Kamala different than we think. I don't know. Maybe this issue of Kamala's race isn't as potent as we think. And that's a good thing, because this shouldn't be about race. And that's exactly how Trump, whether he even knew what he was doing or not, shifted the debate. Everybody's now talking about what Trump needs to do to win. And what he touched on in his reference to Kamala's mixed race, she uses this side sometimes, the other side the other time for political opportunity, gets to the heart of Kamala Harris. She's fake. And there's nothing wrong with people with mixed backgrounds identifying in different ways at different times. It's natural. But politicians are phony. And Kamala is a career politician who goes where the wind blows and changes positions day to day, changes accents. She does what's easy in the moment so she can't get pinned down. Everybody knows people like Kamala Harris. She's the kind of girl who's nice to your face, talks behind your back. She's someone who calls you a racist and then joins your ticket. Whatever Trump says, he'll say it to your face. Whoever you are, no matter what you look like. That's real.
He may not have sound like a used car salesman, which most politicians do. See, what a lot of people fail to realize is the reason why MAGA supports Trump is because we like the fact that he's not presidential. We like the fact that he's real. And that's what we appreciate. We need authenticity in this White House.
This is why Hillary lost. Voters didn't like her because she was phony. WikiLeaks revealed that Hillary had two positions on an issue. A public position and a private position. Same thing with Kamala, except she doesn't even have a position. She literally just said she wants to get rid of your guns, your health care, oil drilling, and ICE. And 3 months before the election, her campaign puts out a statement that says, nah, she doesn't believe in any of that. What? The first female president is going to be a woman with no principles and no policies? I don't know, guys. Her California sponsor, Willie Brown, is advising Kamala Harris that she ought to embrace her hazy ideological categorization, because if she keeps people continually guessing, then she can adjust the interpretation of your guess every time she sees you. How fake is Kamala? She goes by Mamala, but behind closed doors, she makes her interns cry. She won't let them.
I'm Jeff Bennett. I'm the Navaz is away. On the NewsHour tonight,
their brutal ordeal is over, and they're free.
High-profile Americans held in Russia are released as part of the biggest East-West prisoner swap since the Cold War. Emergency crews struggle to contain rapidly spreading wildfires burning through large swaths of the western U.S. And former President Donald Trump doubles down on the remarks he made about Vice President Kamala Harris at a convention for black journalists. Concerns about a growing conflict in the Middle East start our day's other headlines. That's after Israel's military confirmed an airstrike last month had killed the leader of Hamas's military wing, Mohammed Deif. Also today, Iran's supreme leader attended the funeral in Tehran for another Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed in an attack this week. Israel has not claimed responsibility. While in Beirut, mourners paid their respects for Hezbollah commander Fouad Shukr, who was killed in an Israeli strike in Lebanon's capital on Tuesday. Addressing the crowd, Hezbollah's leader threatened retaliation, saying the conflict had entered a new phase. For his part, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country is ready for any response.
Israel is highly prepared for any scenario, both defensively and offensively. We will exact a very heavy price for any act of aggression against us from any arena.
In Tel Aviv, Israelis took to the streets to mark 300 days since the October 7th attack and called for an immediate release of hostages still being held in Gaza. The U.S. Air Force has concluded that a deadly Osprey crash off the coast of Japan last year was caused by a, quote, catastrophic failure in a gearbox. The investigation also found that the pilot ignored warnings to land the aircraft. The crash killed 8 service members and led to a months-long grounding of all military Ospreys. It was one of several Osprey crashes in recent years that killed 20 service members overall. A New York appeals court has rejected Donald Trump's attempt to have the gag order in his hush money case lifted. A panel found that the judge in the trial, Juan Merchan, was right to extend parts of the order until Mr. Trump is sentenced in September. Separately, Mr. Trump's defense team has asked that Merchan be recused from the case for a third time. In a court filing, they cited an alleged conflict involving the judge's daughter and her ties to Vice President Kamala Harris, who is now likely to be Mr. Trump's opponent in the November election. Senate Republicans today blocked legislation that would have expanded the child tax credit for low-income families and extend some corporate tax breaks. In doing so, they torpedoed a bipartisan $79 billion tax bill that the House had overwhelmingly approved. Republicans are betting that they can push through a more conservative tax bill next year if they win control of Congress and the White House. The U.S. Department of Transportation proposed a rule today that would ban airlines from charging parents to sit with their children. Under the proposal, children 13 years or younger must be allowed to sit with their parent or guardian for free. If adjacent seats aren't available when booking, families can opt for a full refund or wait for a seat to open up. And if one doesn't, they can rebook for free. The Biden administration says the rule could save a family of 4 up to $200 in seat fees. On Wall Street today, stocks dropped after recent data sparked worries of an economic slowdown. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell nearly 500 points, or more than 1%. The Nasdaq lost 400 points, falling back toward the 17,000-point level. The S&P 500 also ended sharply lower on the day. And spoiler alert, we have more results from the Paris Olympics. The all-around final for women's gymnastics was packed with stellar performances, but in the end, gold went to the greatest of all time. Simone Biles can now add a record 6th Olympic gold to her resume. Another American, Suni Lee, got the bronze. And swimmer Katie Ledecky made history by capturing silver in the 4x200 freestyle relay. That's Ledecky's 13th Olympic medal, making her the most decorated U.S. female Olympian ever. Looking at the overall medal count, and Team USA has solidified its lead with 37 medals, including gold medals today in swimming, rowing, and fencing events. Still to come on the NewsHour, we speak with voters about how the shakeups in the presidential race have shifted their views. Key conspirators of the 9/11 attacks, now held at Guantanamo Bay, are set to plead guilty. What's in the deal? And a new book on the international strongmen who work together to end democracies.
On this Thursday night, the biggest prisoner swap since the Cold War. 24 people, including a dual Canadian-American, finally free.
Their brutal ordeal is over.
Why Russia agreed to this now, plus the prisoner who was supposed to be part of it. Hamas takes another hit with the assassination of its military chief.
Mohammed Deif had survived 7 assassination attempts, at least.
And what was hidden in a guest house that killed Hamas's political leader. Canada's mortgage rule modification, the short-term relief for certain homeowners that could lead to long-term pain. And making another splash at the Olympics, Canadian Summer McIntosh's record-breaking win.
Global National with Doc.
Tonight, free and on their way home after months-long historic negotiations. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and Marine veteran Paul Whelan, along with 14 others, are out of Russian prisons.
Their brutal ordeal is over, and they're free.
The new details behind what went into the prisoner swap and who was released to Russia in exchange.
It is difficult to send back a convicted criminal to secure the release of an innocent American.
The CBS Evening News starts now. Two American journalists and a U.S. Marine veteran are free tonight following one of the largest prisoner exchanges between the U.S. and Russia since the end of the Cold War. Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us. Here they are holding the American flag. You can see Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter, smiling from ear to ear. They are in the air right now, headed for Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, where they will be met by the president and vice president late tonight. The White House calls it the most complex exchange in history, and here's why. It happened in Turkey and involved 8 nations, 24 prisoners, and months of behind-the-scenes negotiations. CBS's Nancy Cordes is at the White House with more on how this deal came through.
Video from Russian TV shows reporter Evan Gershkovich and Marine veteran Paul Whelan being walked across a tarmac and onto an awaiting plane. The news this morning sparking applause at the Wall Street Journal. Their colleague released after 16 months in captivity. Whelan was held for nearly 6 years. Today, the U.S. government released this picture of both men coming home, along with Russian-American radio reporter Alsu Kurmasheva, who was arrested last October.
All 3 falsely accused of being spies.
President Biden celebrated today alongside the families of the freed.
Boy, have we been busy. Still happening right now. The largest and most historic prisoner swap since the Cold War, with 3 Americans and a permanent U.S. resident right now out of their Russian prison cells, and they are on their way home. We've got new video from the moments they were set free. We'll show you that in just a moment. And in the Middle East, this entire region holding its breath, with Iran expected to strike back at Israel after the Israelis apparently killed another high-ranking Palestinian militant. We are live in the region with the latest on the escalating tensions there. Plus, the pieces quickly falling into place to officially nominate Vice President Harris, what the DNC is doing right at this moment to lock her in as the VP's team narrows its search for a running mate. Then out west, thousands of acres burning right now across 3 states. Why a change in the wind could make things even worse. We're live on the ground in Colorado. Plus, new audio shows Illinois police knew that Sonia Massey was struggling with mental health issues. The 911 call from her daughter, the police, from her mother rather, warning about her daughter, to police later in the show. Good day, I'm Tom Costello. I am in for Hallie, and at this hour, American.
Tonight, pulling off a prisoner swap. A man born in Canada among detainees, now free.
Their brutal ordeal is over, and they're free.
The complicated collaboration that led to an extraordinary exchange. A summer gold rush in Paris.
You just watched history. This is incredible.
A new smartphone scam targeting SIM cards.
They're looking for juicy targets. They're looking for people where they can get a greater yield from.
And holy mola.
Pulling for all they're worth to drag this poor animal back into the water.
The mammoth rescue of a sunfish beach near the Bay of Fundy.
For these kids, the first week of August means the first day of school. Some schools in the Peel District School Board just outside Toronto follow an alternative school year calendar, a summer break lasting just a month, but longer winter and spring breaks.
I don't see any downsides to it. I personally love it. I love the fact that they get the breaks in between. It forces us as a family to take vacations.
Proponents say it reduces the summer slide. That's a loss of learning that can happen over the long summer break. This administrator sees another benefit too.
Teachers in a regular calendar will spend, I'm going to say, the first 2 or 3 months just going over routines, review, expectation. The most time that students are ever away is 4 weeks at a time.
But there are drawbacks. For starters, keeping kids in class during those scorching August days only works for schools with air conditioning, something many schools in Canada don't have. This expert says there also needs to be a buy-in from teachers.
Teachers are also parents, and they are not available. If they're teaching year-round, then they're not available in the summer to look after their kids who may not be attending a year-round school.
But one thing experts agree on is this more balanced school year can work for specific communities, and families at this elementary school say they wouldn't have it any other way.
It's really impacted the learning in a positive way rather than being stretched in the remaining months. The breaks really help them recoup, and I feel that the learning's a lot better.
As these kids trade in summer camps for classrooms. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Caledon, Ontario.
A court in Kenya has ordered the extradition of a man accused of murdering his girlfriend in the United States. Kevin Kangete will go on trial in Massachusetts on first-degree murder charges for the death of Margaret Mbitu, a nurse, in November 2023. Her body was found with multiple stab wounds in his SUV in a garage in Boston's Logan Airport 2 days after her family reported her missing. Police say he'd boarded a flight from Logan to Kenya the day before Mbitu's body was discovered. He was tracked down in Kenya 3 months after the murder and arrested, but escaped in a minivan just 1 week into his detention. Kenyan police launched a manhunt and investigation, eventually tracking him down to a relative's home in Nairobi, where he was rearrested. They also arrested 4 police officers, 2 of the suspect's relatives, and a lawyer who they accused of assisting in the prison break. Prosecutors on Thursday testified that when Kangete was arrested, he was found in possession of items belonging to and a Visa card. Lawyers for Guinea's former military leader Moussa Dadis Camara says he will appeal his conviction on Wednesday for crimes against humanity. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison on charges stemming from the 2009 massacre of more than 150 people during a pro-democracy rally in the capital Conakry. Demonstrators at the stadium were protesting against Kamara's plans to run for president. Inflation in Kenya has fallen to 4.3% year-on-year in July, from 4.6% a month earlier. The four-year low was helped by a strong shilling and marginal price reductions in key household costs such as electricity and fuel. This has led to a reduction in transport costs, which saw a rise of just 4% in July compared to 7.7% the previous month. The price of many foods decreased by 0.5% between June to the demonstrations.
The Hezbollah's leader warned Thursday that the conflict with Israel has entered a new phase as he addressed mourners at the funeral of a commander from the group who was killed by an Israeli airstrike this week in Beirut. "We are facing a big battle now. It is beyond a support front now." Here on Wednesday in the Iranian capital of Tehran.
21-year-old swimmer Ziad Salim is one of 4 athletes representing Sudan in 3 disciplines at the Olympic Games in Paris. Born in the United States, he says he's proud to be racing in the 200-meter backstroke on behalf of his parents' country.
I'm super grateful and I'm excited to go back to Sudan. I mean, I was able to win a couple medals at African Championships and also Arab. I was able to kind of enjoy that with them. So I'm
was plunged into war in 2023, which has seen hundreds of thousands of people displaced around the country at borders. Did him to be a positive factor, albeit for a short period.
I know that in my own family, I'm in this or to
Abdullah Arabi.
This is Asia Now.
It's 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi, and 10 o'clock in Jakarta. Good morning. I'm still a state 8. The height of the Cold War, a multinational deal to free. Stronger for
How 24 ton actualité.
Thanks for being with us here on the line. 24 prisoners in Russia, the West, in the biggest held for and held in recent days. And Venezuelan opposition leader the dispute here and 4 people are heading Vadim Krasikov, who was imprisoned in Germany for the murder of a Chechen military commander in Berlin. Imprisoned awards. The prisoners were set free from jails in 7 different countries, over in the Turkish capital following long President
in post-Soviet history. In Kremlin, Russia has received prisoners convicted of some serious crimes in the West. Vladimir Putin welcomed them home and thanked them for their...
First of all, I would like to congratulate you on your return. I would bless the loyalty to...
Who was convicted of killing a Chechen rebel. Also on the Artivich Stefan and Anna Valena, who a spy who for years successfully pretended to be a Brazilian professor working in Spanish. Accused him of the trust. A detailed report on the daughter of Boris Nemtsov, a famous Putin critic, assassinated in 2015, is all included in the exchange. For a $93 million hack-to-trade conspiracy.
Now to other world news, and tensions between Israel and its allies and Iran's so-called axis of resistance, the Hamas leader. It's Hani Highway presidential inauguration. Blames Israel. Military leader Mohammed Daif in
the ID claims Daif is the head of on the on Wednesday. On the July, which reportedly targeted Kiev. According to health officials, 90 people were killed in the strike, including displaced civilians living in tents. For now, Hamas has not confirmed if Kiev will lie in Hamas can be viewed as victories for Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu. They risk inflaming regional tensions with Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. With the war now set to enter its 10th month, dozens of Israeli hostages still remain in Gaza.
The leader of the Israeli military in Lebanon, Hassan Nasrallah, has announced that the conflict with Israel has now entered what he called a new phase, as he addressed mourners at the funeral of the group's most senior military commander. A video to mourners he vowed to avenge all the leaders who were recently executed. The group fired dozens of rockets into northern Israel in the first attack since Shukr was killed. Next, the top US diplomat Antony Blinken says there is overwhelming evidence that Venezuelan opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez was the one that won the recent presidential election. The National Election Council, which is loyal to the government, has handed a third 6-year term, though, to the president Nicolas Maduro. The opposition leader Maria Machado is in hiding after being threatened with arrest and has called for protests in every city on Saturday to denounce the disputed result. Protests in the nation have already turned deadly, as Charlotte Hughes explains.
Days after the contested results of Venezuela's presidential election triggered deadly and widespread protests, many here in Caracas are doing their best to return to their daily routines.
Toda la gente ha salido a la calle y eso a trabajar porque hay que trabajar para comer, si uno no trabaja no come.
However, tensions are still running high as the election results dispute continues. Venezuela's National Electoral Council declared the incumbent Nicolas Maduro the winner on Sunday, but the opposition claims its tally of around 90% indicates it's under support Maduro. In the election, several opposition figures have been detained, and on Thursday, opposition leader Maria Machado said she was in hiding and feared for her life. Machado, who was banned from running for president by institutions loyal to Maduro, has called for protests on Saturday to denounce his disputed re-election.
Este sábado, 3 de agosto, nos encontramos todos en familia, con nuestros hijos, nietos, abuelos, en todas las ciudades de Venezuela, a las 10 de la mañana, porque vamos a hacer valer la verdad y porque el mundo va a ver la fuerza y la determinación de una sociedad decidida a vivir en libertad.
Among the countries who have called for the Electoral Council to release the full results is the US, whose top diplomat Antony Blinken said that Edmundo Gonzalez won the most votes. As a result of election-related criticism, Venezuela has expelled diplomats from several countries, including Argentina and Peru. Brazil is to take over administration of the Peruvian embassy and that of Argentina, where several Venezuelan oppositions are currently under protection. Meanwhile, Maduro, who denounced the protests as an attempted coup, says his party is ready to present all vote tallies to Venezuela's top court.
Now to US politics, where the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris is just days away from announcing her running mate, who will be joining her from Tuesday on a tour of 4 swing states. Solange Moujon looks at who's in the running.
A vice president looking for a vice president. Kamala Harris has a slew of choices, but the calculation on who'd be best is complex. There's the issue of swing states, which are essential in winning the Electoral College in November. Here, there are 2 main contenders from these purple states. There's Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro, help the go blue, outspoken about his Jewish faith and pro-Israel. This could be a hard sell for both protesters against the war in Gaza and for the Christian right. Then there's Mark Kelly. His biography fits the bill. A veteran and former astronaut, he's married to a victim of gun violence, former Representative Gabby Giffords. A senator from Arizona, he has experience on the border and on immigration issues. This could help Harris. But if chosen, Democrats would need to find a replacement candidate in Arizona in the next midterms. A very tricky state for Democrats to win. Another veteran is also being considered, former teacher and coach Governor Tim Walz. He's not from a swing state, Minnesota, but his Midwestern background could appeal to voters across the Midwest. Then there's another governor, Kentucky's Andy Beshear. Close to Harris for years, he's been pegged as an amiable attack dog for his successful quips against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. His southern roots could also help, but making a dent in Trump's base in Kentucky may not be possible anyway. Finally, there's Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Skilled in interviews, he's highly popular among progressives. Many Democrats hope a Harris-Buttigieg pick would make double history as the first black woman and homosexual man on a ticket. But here, too, this could be a vulnerability when it comes to the conservative right. U.S. media has reported that two candidates, Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom, have ruled themselves out of the running. Generally, picking a VP takes months of careful consideration, for it's a role that can set the future of the party and the presidency for years. But here Kamala Harris has had to whittle down that into just a few weeks.
Day 6 of the Paris Olympic Games has been historic, first of all with heartbreak for Scottish tennis player Andy Murray, whose trophy-filled career has now come to it, as defeated in the men's double quarterfinals. American pair Taylor Fritz and Tommy Paul delivered the knockout blow with 6-2, 6-4 victory at Suzanne-Longlen. Meanwhile, her American, Simone Biles, showed why she's been dubbed the greatest of all time. Selena Sykes explains.
If there was ever any doubt, there certainly isn't now. Simone Biles cements her legacy as the greatest of all time after winning the women's all-around event 8 years after she won it for the first time in Rio in 2016 to get her 6th Olympic gold medal. Her intentions were clear from the offset as she performed her Biles 2 move on the vault. It's one of the 5 skills that are named after the American. For a rare mistake from her on the uneven bars that cost her some points, but she fought back like a champion with a routine on the beam packed with difficulty before a spectacular finale with that amazing floor routine that brought the whole Bercy Arena onto their feet. Biles, who becomes the oldest woman in 72 years to win this event in a grueling sport that is often dominated by the twisties of Tokyo, are long behind her now, and she has the chance, of course, to win more gold medals here in Paris because she's also featuring in the finals of the vault, beam and floor.
So what's that done to the medal table so far? Well, China is at the top with 11 golds, just ahead of the United States, which has got up to a slow start but is up to second. Hosts France currently sit third with 8 golds, just ahead of Australia and Japan to round off the top 5. And that's all for this edition. Stay tuned to France 24.
Sky News at 4 a.m. Your latest headlines. A judge allows the 17-year-old accused over the Southport stabbings to be publicly named. Prime Minister Keir Starmer launches in reaction to the violence in Southport and elsewhere.
The actions of a tiny, mindless minority in our society.
Flight to freedom. Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich is among those released in the biggest US-Russia prisoner swap since the Cold War. The BBC Director General defends not sacking Hugh Edwards after his arrest over indecent images of children. And Sir Andy Murray's tennis career comes to a close with a loss to the USA in the men's doubles at the Olympics. A very good morning. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us here on Sky News. The 17-year-old accused of murdering 3 young girls at a dance club in Southport has been named Axel Rudakabana, who was born in Cardiff. A judge took the highly step of releasing his details, saying he wanted to stop the spread of misinformation. Online speculation about the identity of the suspect has fueled rioting by far-right activists. To clamp that violence order. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first our crime correspondent Martin Brunt reports on Axel Rudakabana's appearance in court in
He arrived at court with huge security around him. The teenage defendant was in the white prison van, so far anonymous, but about to be named publicly. Axel Rudakabana is 17, British, born in Wales and of Rwandan heritage. He faces 14 charges, including possession of a kitchen knife with a curved blade. The most serious, the murders of B.B. King, Elsie Stankham and Elise Aguirre. the attempted murders of 8 other young children stabbed during a holiday dance and yoga class in Southport on Monday, and the attempted murder of yoga teacher Leanne Lucas and next-door businessman John Hayes. Rudakabana made 2 brief court appearances, first before a magistrate and then a more senior judge. He hid his face for much of the time, refusing to confirm his name. In law, at 17, he's a child.
This is DW News live from Berlin. A historic prisoner swap between Russia and Western nations. American reporter Evan Gershkovich is among those freed by the Kremlin. Russians released by the West include a convicted murderer freed from jail in Germany. The Israeli military says it's ready to respond immediately to any threat. This after Iran threatens retaliation for the suspected Israeli assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran.
Biggest release since the Cold War. Tells you something about the geopolitical state we have slipped into with Russia. But politically, in domestic politics, this could be one of those incidents before an election that sort of boosts one candidate. You know, the vice president are not completely immune on this one. They did let, as I said, and as you noted, an assassin, a hitman go to get these people back.
We'll just take another listen in. It seems the US president speaking.
For the family.
Did you think that this moment would come, sir?
Yes.
What made you feel so confident?
My relationship with other heads of state that I had to get to agree on all that.
Tell us what you said. How did he compare? What did you have to say to the family members and the 3 Americans, sir?
Pardon me?
What did you have to say to the 3 Americans and their family members, sir?
Welcome home and beyond that.
You said, sir, that family is everything earlier today. What has it meant to be with the family all day today as they are now finally reunited with their loved ones?
You can appreciate, look, anyone who's lost family or worried about whether family would come home, whatever the circumstance was, has to understand the extreme, you've heard me say it before. My dad used to say family is the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it really is. It's about who we are. It's about who we are as a country.
What is your message tonight to Vladimir Putin?
Stop.
What's your message to the Americans? The American people are watching this broadcast tonight, and I think it's fair to say they're celebrating with the families. What's your message to the American people?
There's nothing beyond our capacity when we act together. Nothing. Remember who the hell we are. We're the United States of America. The United States of America. We put back together relationships with countries that we haven't had before. We rebuilt NATO. We rebuilt the circumstances that allowed this to happen. That's why it happens.
And Mr. President, should American journalists ever feel afraid about reporting abroad?
I think, look, no matter where you are, there's certain places that you're going to be afraid. The idea you're never going to be afraid. You'd never show up anywhere in the Middle East. You wouldn't show up anywhere in Russia. You wouldn't show up anywhere. It matters. It matters to be aware of what you're going into and not to take undue chances because I'm going to come get you.
Of your many achievements, where does this rank among your many achievements as president?
Well, look, this is, to me, this is about the essence of who we are as a country. It really is about personal relationships. It's about family. It's about being able to have access to your own, the people you love and you adore. Imagine how you'd all feel if you had your being.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.